Risa, welcome to the Calm Mom podcast. So grateful to have you with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. Before we jump in, let everyone know who you are and what you're teaching and all the things about you.
So, I'm a functional nutritionist. I have a private practice in Newport Beach, California, but I work with people all over the country. And I am all about finding root causes and prevention. I'm not really good at guessing. I don't like to play darts with the lights off when I cannot see the target. So, I order extensive labs. I do a ton of, well, just not a ton, but a pretty extensive, comprehensive bioscreen, which is a blood lab that tells me all 9 markers of the thyroid, all 4 markers of blood sugar, iron, lipids, white blood cells, all that kind of stuff. So I can really have a good idea what's going on. And then I do a stool test as well, which gives me a lot of information about the good guys, the bad guys. Do we have any visitors, any invaders? Do we have, are we producing enough enzymes? Are we having inflammation? How are we doing with digestive enzyme production? Fats? Are we having a hard time absorbing our fats or metabolizing them? And inflammation, the driver of disease, all that kind of stuff. So by those two tests, I pretty much know which way we're going. Yeah, I feel very fortunate. I have the best job in the world. I watch people heal all day long, every day.
I can feel that. That is so beautiful. Okay, so I want to start here because so much of what we talk about on this show is the impact of stress, right? Our coping mechanisms for stress, the pace with which we live life, our boundaries, all these kinds of different things. And I think it would be good to start off with just a discussion around how you're seeing stress, particularly with women, impact their physical health, especially when it comes to their hormones, autoimmune conditions, all these different things that you're seeing.
How much time do we have?
I know, right? Seriously.
Well, so I'll take pieces of that. So stress can come in different forms, right? We have full on emotional stress, right? We've got too much to do. We're taking care of too many people. There's not enough hours in the day. We have that emotional stress. We've got pressure from work. We've got pressure in relationships, everything. All of that life stress is normal. Everybody has some. We, I think, have a copious amount in this day and age because we're never really unplugging. So we have that. That's a major, major, major contributor. And I'll talk about how that affects us in a minute. But then we also have environmental stress, right? So we have toxins and we have chemicals that we're either eating, we're putting on our skin, we're breathing them in. And this is another form of stress. The body is feeling that environmental stress, right? Toxins are really a tough thing that we have a little bit of control over. And so that's another one that should be mentioned because it is a contributor of the body having to manage it. And what happens when we have that internal stress or external stress, if you will? Pretty much it affects every single part of the body, right? It affects the brain, it affects the digestion big time. How many people do you come into my office and say, well, I only have, diarrhea when I'm stressed, or I only get stomach aches when I'm stressed, or, it disturbs our sleep. We should know this, right? Cortisol is naturally high in the morning and throughout the day it dips down and the sun goes down and the melatonin production goes up and the cortisol is supposed to go down. That's how we get to sleep. But a lot of people have this cortisol issue. Their cortisol's going up at night and their melatonin production is not happening. So those are people who are having a hard time falling asleep. Those are also people who, that cortisol dysregulation can affect weight loss big time. We will not lose weight if we have a cortisol imbalance. And how does it affect autoimmunity? I mean, it perpetuates the inflammation, right? Which is what autoimmunity is. Another way that it affects specifically the thyroid is we test, at least I do, for reverse T3. Reverse T3 tells us the impact of cortisol. It could also be inflammation, but it's usually cortisol. How does that affect your thyroid health? So you might be making enough T3, which is your active thyroid hormone, but you might be so stressed and your cortisol is so high that you are stealing from your free T3, which isn't going to help your metabolism. It's not going to help your sleep, your stress, your hair thinning, nails brittle, constipation, anxiety, all of those things, right? Also, when we're stressed, we eat all of our B vitamins in our intestinal lining. So for those vegans, Who
Mhm.
are not eating a lot of B12 or a lot of B vitamins, if they're not eating leafy greens, we are eating it from the intestinal lining. So it helps perpetuate or accelerate leaky gut scenarios.
Mhm.
So B vitamins are super important for people who are stressed, big time. Anybody who has anxiety, depression, B vitamins are integral for those people for sure.
Wow. When you say B vitamins, is there like, I don't know a lot about B vitamins or vitamins in general. Are there specific ones? Is there a range? Is it any B vitamins?
Excellent question, Michelle.
Yeah.
There is a gene mutation that I test every single person for called MTHFR.
I have that. I learned
You
about it
do.
through
So you don't even
pregnancy.
know
Yeah.
about it. That's awesome. Yeah. So MTHFR is super common. I mean, the stats are 50 to 90% of the population has it, but I
Wow.
test every single person for it. And I would say it's kind of like 98 or
Wow.
95%. It's very unusual when I find somebody who doesn't have it. And basically, this gene mutation, I have it, both my kids have it. It's 100% genetic. And basically, what it means is that you're not methylizing and or processing either your B12, which we get from animal sources, and or your folate, your B9, which we get from green leafies mostly. And you could have both alleles. You could have one allele. You can have one from two parents and
Mhm.
one from another. I mean, there's so many different combinations that you can have. But having MTHFR, it's critically important to be taking a B vitamin or a B complex, in my preference, in methylcobalamin form, meaning that we cannot get it from natural sources.
Okay.
Even if you're eating a steak a day or you're eating tons of green leafies, your body just cannot process it. It can't methylize it. So you have to get it from external sources, such as a B vitamin, B complex vitamin, that or a B12 and folate in methylcobalamin form. So I have my B ultra, which is what I take. My family takes that every single day. And if you don't take that, not only does it affect your gut because of the stress we talked about, but it also
Mhm.
affects RNA and DNA. But in addition to that, we will typically see homocysteine, which is another inflammatory marker that we look at. We'll see a homocysteine elevate. And if homocysteine is about 12 or higher for long periods of time, it increases your likelihood for dementia, cardiovascular
Mm.
disease, macular degeneration. We'll also see your MCV, the size of your red blood cell, increase a bit. So it is imperative that people with MTHFR, which is practically everybody, take
Yeah.
a methylized B vitamin or B complex.
Wow. Okay, this is so fascinating. I have so many questions to bring, but I'm going to start here. Um, there is a difference between the stressors in our life, which we were talking about, right? Like all the stuff that stresses us out, and then the stress that that causes on our body, right? How can or when you're working with your clients, what are some ways that you help support them in dealing with the stress on their body? Obviously, we've talked about sleep, I'm sure movement, diet, but like maybe you could just name a couple things that people
Sure,
can do that can help them with the physiological impact, the
sure.
response.
There are lots of natural things that you can do. Unplugging is a big one for me. I
Mm.
just think we're just so in the
Yeah.
race and plugged in, and we're just not aware, we're not present in our state, right?
Yeah.
So, unplugging is a big one. And the other one is Epsom salt baths. Epsom salt, if you put 2 cups in just Epsom salt, no perfumes, dyes, chemicals, you can have a little bit of essential oils. Some of them come with that. But other than that, just Epsom salt that you can get at Target or Home Depot, 2 cups, 20 minutes or more, and soak in that bathtub before you go to bed. It helps bring down your cortisol naturally. Not exercising in the evenings or the
Mhm.
afternoons, that will help regulate your cortisol because you're trying
Yeah.
to ramp up in the evening, which we're trying to ramp you down. And then there are natural things like lavender, ashwagandha, licorice, all of these natural herbs that will help with de-stressing. So there's teas, so you don't
Mm.
have to go and buy 17 supplements. You can get a de-stress tea and drink that. That's very helpful. Um, and removing the stressful chemicals, as I mentioned, is a really easy way to do it. Just watch your cleaning supplies, your makeup, your deodorant, your candles, all of those things will help to your adrenals. Unfortunately, I work with so many people with adrenal fatigue, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, it's a slow process. It's a
Yeah.
slow climb back, but you can do it. Oh, and meditation, I forgot to mention that. Some kind of calming to the brain. So it doesn't have, I'm not a big meditator. I've tried a million times. I've been trained in transcendental meditation, but it's just not my thing. It's like a timeout. I'm like, I'm like, it's just not mine. But
Yeah.
some form of quiet time, whether
Yes.
it's a walk by yourself without any plugs, pods, or anything that you are trying to stimulate, just be present. You can
Hmm.
even just sit in a chair and just look at your surroundings and breathe. Breath work is really, really, really helpful. Yoga, things like that. Um, it really actually works. It's very effective.
Yeah, it sure does. We talk a lot on the podcast about stillness. That's what we kind of
Mhm.
call that, overarching group of things that we do without stimulation to
Yeah.
our nervous system or intaking information. You mentioned adrenal fatigue, and I feel like I work with a lot of women who experience burnout, and that's a term that gets thrown around a lot. I'm not sure people really understand what's happening in their body if they're experiencing adrenal fatigue. Can you talk a little bit about how that shows up first? And then second, like what's actually going on in our body when we say that we have quote unquote adrenal fatigue?
So what happens is, as I mentioned, that cortisol, it starts early, high in the morning, and then it dips down. And what happens when we dysregulate that? We have a lot of stressful events. We never have stillness. A lot of things. We have a bad incident. Gone through a
Yeah.
traumatic event in our life, right? And it could even be as simple as pregnancy, right? Having it just changes your hormones. It changes your sleep. It increases your stress. You may not have a helpful partner. I mean, there's a million things that could set that off. And when you see adrenal fatigue, we typically it usually goes high, right? And then it will fall.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll know it when it falls because you are just exhausted. You
Yeah.
just can't function. You'll get into bed and you're like, oh my God, I could sleep for 15 hours, and you cannot fall asleep.
Yeah.
That is a very typical sign of adrenal fatigue. You could wake up in the middle of the night. Usually that has to do with either blood sugar or cortisol. It could have to do with hormones or liver detoxification. But the two major reasons why we wake up in the middle of the night is cortisol or blood sugar. And if we have blood sugar issues, or you're having some wine, or you're having some chocolate or cookies or something like that, and you wake up at 3:30, it's probably blood sugar between 3 and 4. But if you're waking up at different times, can't get back to sleep, it's probably adrenals. I use a cream with it, which is phosphatidylserine. It's got some essential oils in it as well. And I give that. It's called Adrenocom, and it helps people. You just rub it on your feet before you go to bed, and it helps stabilize your cortisol, and it helps. It helps with the sleep. But those are typical symptoms. I was working with a CEO from a Fortune 500 company many, many years ago, and she came to see me. She had a very traumatic business event that was
Mm-hmm.
very hindering to her business. By It was a major impact. And she came to see me and she said, I cannot sleep longer than 45 minutes at any
Wow.
stretch for months and months. So I said, well, I ordered an adrenal stress index test, and sure enough, there it was. And she never, as I talked about that line, that trajectory that goes down in cortisol, she didn't even hit the line. She was so above the line that she never, I mean, she kind of her trajectory was down, but she never even hit the actual normal line. Now, if she kept doing this, she would be under, right? And then she'd come to see me and she couldn't function.
Yeah.
But it's really amazing. I worked with a high school senior, and she was the valedictorian. She was absolutely a rock star, but she had the worst tardy attendance record because
Mm-hmm.
she couldn't. Her parents brought her in to see me, and they're like, she does not sleep, and all this stress. She was trying to get into Harvard, and all this stress was having its impact, right? So we did
Yeah.
an adrenal stress index test on her, and sure enough, she was at night, she was going way up. I'm like, yeah, she could be doing lots of good studying at 2 in the morning. So
She,
yeah, and then in the morning, I mean, it was like at the bottom of the page. She couldn't get up.
wow.
So it's a real thing, and it
Yeah.
really affects us.
Yes. Can you teach us about melatonin? Because I think a lot of people take melatonin when they're struggling with sleep, and I want to hear your thoughts. I'm assuming it's
Yeah.
probably not the best resort.
Yeah, no, I'm actually a big proponent of it. I take it myself pretty much every night. And our melatonin production, we should be making melatonin production. As
Mhm.
we age, we don't produce and excrete as many
Mm.
hormones as effectively as we used to. So when you're young, I don't really recommend melatonin unless there's no cortisol. I mean, I'd have to look and see because I individualize everything, but there probably isn't a need for long-term melatonin production. If you're off
Okay.
course, I'll give you melatonin for a little bit, but I'm looking for the root, right? Because we're
Mhm.
not born with a deficiency of melatonin. It happens after time.
Yeah.
But melatonin is actually really good. There were a lot of studies saying that it was very helpful because it's an antioxidant for COVID.
Ah.
And so it was interesting. But I am a fan of melatonin. You have to have a clean kind, and I wouldn't heavily rely on it. But if it's that or some kind of a sleep um,
Mm.
uh, pharmaceutical, I'm absolutely going to say take the melatonin. But again, I'm looking for the source. So there's something
Yeah.
that I give people. I have all different types of candy, basically, and sleep candy. And so, if it's an adrenal, then I can I can address the adrenal stuff. So there's 5-HTP and valerian and
Mhm.
all those kinds of things that will help with sleeping.
Yeah.
But if it's something else, then I'll address it. But typically, if we're not falling asleep, it's cortisol.
That makes a lot of sense. Um, let's shift gears a little bit to autoimmune conditions. Can you speak to our audience about maybe what are some of the common autoimmunes that you see, especially in women that are kind of in the age and stage of life of our audience, and then maybe some of the roots that you're seeing or some of the trends that you're seeing as it relates to that.
Yeah, so I'm a former autoimmune person myself. I had
Hmm.
Hashimoto's, and it's very common when you get pregnant. It changes your
Hmm.
hormonal chemistry, and it's a very likely. I mean, it can be a root cause for sparking autoimmunity. My first pregnancy was totally great, easy, no problem conceiving, nothing was a problem. And then I couldn't conceive my second time. So I went to a fertility specialist after we tried for a few years and basically found out that my thyroid was an underachiever. And they gave me a pill. And I said, how long do I take this pill for? And he said, every day. And I said, no, like for how long? He said, oh, forever. And I was like, what? Like, you're giving me a synthetic medication that's supposed to mimic a hormone that I'm supposed to be producing. I've got all the
Right.
equipment to produce this. A, why are we, giving me a synthetic for that? And B, why are we not asking why is it not working? Right?
Right.
Like it should be working. So that sort of started me on my path. And then after I had my second child, because I realized I had MTHFR and infertility and miscarriages are one of those symptoms. So I took my methylated B vitamins and I got pregnant naturally, totally fine on my own and great pregnancy. And shortly thereafter, I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's. So I'm like, what? Why is it that I'm having these antibodies that are attacking my thyroid gland? Why does it think it's the enemy?
Yeah.
So I went down, it took me probably about 10 years to create a
Wow.
list because in those days there was no list. I could not find anything by Googling. And I created one. It's in my book, Food Frame. But a third of it is genetics. Another chunk of it, so genetics meaning if you have somebody in your immediate family with any kind of an autoimmune disease, you're more likely to get one.
Okay.
The second major chunk is leaky gut. We talked about that a little bit, but that's when you're creating these antibodies, and they're coming in through the back door in the intestinal lining because we have holes in the intestinal lining. We only have one layer of epithelial cells on the intestinal lining, whereas our outside skin has seven.
Mm.
And so it's very, very easy, very fragile. And if we poke holes, then these things come in and create these antibodies, inflammation. And eventually, those antibodies will need to find a place to park. So they'll find a gland, a tissue, or an organ. And that's how we get autoimmune disease, right?
Mm.
Another root cause is a low vitamin D, chronically low vitamin D, which I see all the time. Even the
Hmm.
professional athletes that I work with who are in the sun a lot, pretty much all day, still have lower levels, not optimal. The other reason is MTHFR that can kick things off. Viruses, so like Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, some viruses can kick off autoimmune disease. Pathogens, so there is certain types of parasites that can be a contributor. I do see this a lot with rheumatoid arthritis. I see
Mm.
it with colitis. I've addressed that quite a bit, and Hashimoto's as well. So we make that connection. Another reason why I do that stool test. Um, and mercury, heavy metals. I had just tremendously high levels of mercury. I was given tuna sandwiches as a kid, like pretty much every day. And then I grew up and I was having tuna salads. And then, ahi came on the scene, and I was like, oh, tuna by day and ahi by night. I was like fully mercury poisoned. So I took a while to figure that one out, and I did, and I took about almost a year to chelate that out of my system. It
Wow.
was really high, like off the page high. So that took a while. And things like a traumatic event, as I mentioned, a really, really bad diet, lots of alcohol, lots of sugar, things like that, lots of processed foods, things like that can absolutely spark an autoimmune disease.
Wow. Can you tell us a little bit more about your healing journey? Like maybe even a time frame, or people who are listening who haven't found anyone who's been able to offer them any solutions, and maybe they are on, medications. Maybe what you would say to them, and then an expectation for like, this is what you can reasonably expect if you start working with someone like myself.
Sure. I went through the same frustration and battle that most
Mhm.
people do. The average person goes to 6 physicians before they're
Wow.
actually diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. 6? Is that crazy? They keep going to another doctor going, I know something's not right. I don't feel
Yeah.
right. And they're like, you're fine. You're fine. So I get the frustration. Even when I was diagnosed, um, I it's funny, I should tell this story, but I actually had, I've never shared this story, but when I was told that my mercury levels were really high, I went to this naturopath who you couldn't get in, and the phone, they didn't answer the phone. It was like, and then you felt so lucky to go, and you filled out your 85,000 pages, and you get there, and she's like, yeah, you've got high mercury. And I go, well, how do I get rid of it? I mean, it's so many years ago, but anyway, she said, well, you're not going to like the answer. And I'm like, well, what is it? And she goes, well, you need, um, I forgot what it's called, Ostrium, I think it was, or I can't remember what it was. But I said, well, okay, well, is it a supplement? I mean,
Yeah.
how do I get it? And she goes, it's in Pringles potato chips. So I said, are you telling
Stop
me I have to
it.
eat Pringles potato chips to remove my mercury? Okay, that was the last time I ever went to her office. So I know the frustration. That is totally not how you get rid of mercury, and that is not an essential ingredient. I have to look that up because I forgot about that story. But anyway, that was one of my frustration stones that I hit along the way.
Yeah.
But I did everything that I could, and I was the investigator. I'm all about why, and I'm all about root causes, and I just don't. I firmly believe that we are not born with a deficiency of medication. That is
Mhm.
just not the answer. Now, medication is great when we need it, and I think
Mhm.
temporary is usually best, but some situations are different. But generally, when people walk into my office and they're on 8 medications, they don't feel fantastic. That is not the definition of health.
Right.
So we've got to figure out why, and our bodies have this ability to heal, which is amazing. So I went down that road and I tested and I did everything. And then I finally met a doctor that who knew more than I did, which was really
Mhm.
hard in those days because I've lived this for so long and I've worked
Yeah.
with people. So I
Yeah.
find, and this is so many years ago, but I find this doctor, I cry all the way home. I spent, I think, $6,000 or $7,000 in his office. This is many years ago. And I did all the testing, and he gave me 5,000 supplements, way more than I would ever give anybody. I had to like make a chart and a spreadsheet. And anyway, I was compliant, 100, maybe 99% compliant for 3 months. I redid my labs and it moved just a hair. And I was just devastated.
Mm.
So my cholesterol was super high. I was in the 300s. And I did a Boston Heart Lab because I was concerned, even though I know cardiovascular disease is not related to cholesterol. I'm like, what's driving up my cholesterol? Of course, now I know. But anyway, in those days, I did the Boston Heart Lab and I knew that teeth and heart are connected.
Mm.
So I found a biological dentist in LA and I ordered myself a stool test. And I walked into her office with my stool test. She took one look at it. She said, that's a salivary bacteria. And 2 seconds later, I was in a CAT scan and she found it. 23 years prior, I had my wisdom teeth extracted and they left a root in my jaw. And I never felt anything, but there was an abscess growing. You couldn't feel it. You couldn't, there was nothing. There was zero, zero, nothing, no symptoms at all. And she ended up going in, removing the root. They had left a piece of metal while they were in there as well. So that was living in there for 23 years. And once we removed that, my blood work started to shift.
Wow.
Yeah. And I changed from a vegan diet to a paleo diet. And I've always exercised. I never ate sugar in those days, never, ever, ever, never. And I couldn't understand why my blood sugars were up. My stress, of course, was up, which was probably moving my blood sugars up. And all of these things were contributing because I consider the whole body one interconnected unit. And that's a perfect
Yeah.
example of why that is true. So
Wow.
crazy. I haven't
That's
heard that story,
fascinating.
right?
Wow.
But yeah, I worked with a surgeon actually. I love working with doctors. They're my favorite because, it's just, I love turning on that light bulb. And I worked with his wife first, and we found Hashimoto's with her. And she lost 72 pounds, and her chronic cough that her husband could not get rid of, or none of his colleagues could get rid of, we got rid of. And like immediately, I mean, she was like amazing. And I get an email from her and she's like, I can't believe this, but my husband wants to talk to you. She was shocked. So I said, bring him on in. So I work with him and we worked together. I did his blood work. I did everything I did with everybody else. And we worked together for my 12-session program. At the end, the last session, he said, I've got to tell you something. I said, what is it? He said, I never mentioned this to you when I first started with you, but 2 years ago, and he was like mid-50s, he goes, 2 years ago, I got hearing aids because my hearing was so bad. He said, this
Mm.
week I was in the hospital. I went to the audiologist and he said, I don't know what you're doing, but you do not need hearing aids at all. So I was like, wow, I see a lot of miracles in my office, but I never had seen that one. I still haven't seen it since. But I sat back and I said, what do you think it is? And I had my own thought of what it was. And sure enough, he said, systemic inflammation. And sure enough, I totally agree with that assessment. So he had all this inflammation that was causing this ear loss, and we
Wow.
were able to reverse that. How crazy is that?
That is fantastic.
Isn't it
Wow.
cool?
Yeah. And you're such a good storyteller. I'm like, I love hearing all of this. It's so awesome. Okay. So for the people listening, you just mentioned a 12-week or 12-step program.
12 sessions.
Tell everyone else, yeah, what you have going on. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who are very are very intrigued and can relate to a lot of the kind of the symptoms and maybe even the stories of being gaslit or seeing all these different doctors that are feeling hopeful. So how can they reach out to you and what can you offer
Yeah, I
them?
work with people all over the country and via Zoom, and they can just reach out on my office, which is Risa Groux Nutrition. It's Risa. Last name is Groux, Groux, like X-ray nutrition. I have my online course for thyroid health, achieving optimal thyroid health, which I have poured my heart and soul in because I know so much about the thyroid. And I talk about every scenario: Hashimoto's, Graves' disease, hyper, thyroidectomy, what to eat, what not to eat, what supplements to take, what not, and labs. How do I order labs and what do I look for and what do they mean? Because we
Wow.
should be able to interpret our own labs. Um, and so I have that course on there. I have my quiz, Your Food Frame, which is my philosophy on how to eat, because when I first started my practice decades ago, I would put everybody on the same exact eating program. And I was
Okay.
like, these people are like thriving and these people are not so much. So I realized that we should all be eating according to our current health status. So if you
Mm.
have diabetes, where you're going to eat one way, and if you have autoimmune disease, you're going to eat a different way, and if you have SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, or you have IBS or chronic bloating, you're going to eat a different way. So we should not, that new diet book that comes out all the time and everybody reads it and your friend loses 35 pounds and you lose nothing. You're like, why is this? Well, because it worked for her because it matched her health status, right?
Mhm.
So I individualize everything because we're different. Everybody's
Yeah.
microbiome is different. Everybody's genetics are different. And our genetics load the gun and our environment, our lifestyle, pull the trigger.
I love that. Okay, we'll link all of that for you guys in the show notes. thank you for being with us. I've learned I've learned so much today. We'll put your website obviously in the show notes, but where are you hanging out? Are you on social media? Are you on YouTube? Like, where can the people find you?
All of the above at Risa Groux Nutrition.
Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. This was so great.
You learned all about B vitamins today.
Yes. I'm going to go buy complex now. Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Thanks for having me.